Welcome to the D-Shift podcast, where we provide inspiration, motivation, and education to help you transition from the challenges of divorce to discover the freedom and ability to live life on your own terms. Are you ready? Let's get this shift started. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the D-Shift podcast. And today we're going to be talking all about the pros and cons of doing a do-it-yourself divorce, and how you could potentially utilize this strategy, or you may want to really reconsider this strategy. And I have a true expert on this. Tracey Bee has been a family attorney for many years. And I'm going to let her tell about her story. But what she decided to do was, instead of practicing law, she wanted to work to help people to be able to navigate the family court system on their own, doing what we call in most areas a pro se divorce. Some places it's called pro per, but it really is doing divorce on your own. There's people who can do this and it works wonderfully. It can be a great strategy. And there's times when it should be used with caution. And there's times when that should be a clear, hell no, this is not the right thing to do. So Tracey, I've set you up now. And I really do appreciate this. So again, Tracey has years of experience in the family court system as an attorney. And I think that is an invaluable level of experience she can bring to working with her clients today. So Tracey, welcome and thank you in advance.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being here. This is a very important topic.
It really is, because especially, let's face it, in today's economy, it can be tough, especially if you know that you're looking at, a divorce that is fairly amicable, and there might be a way to work through this on your own. And mediation is a good option, but you can't just go into mediation like, oh, hey, let's go in there and see what comes out. That's really a big mistake. So I know we're going to get into all of that, but let's start first, Tracey, with, I know I shared just a really brief level of your expertise and experience, but what got you into supporting people this way rather than staying as a traditional attorney through the court system?
So I was in a solo practice as a family law attorney for years. And I remember when I switched over to family law, I was in a courtroom talking to a family court judge. And she knew me from when I did civil. And she called me to the bench and she said to me, hey, nice to see you, but I'm going to tell you right now, in 5 years, you're going to be burned out. You're not going to last in this area of law because it's really stressful. And she was right. And so, but the major thing that really concerned me was the level of people that really needed guidance and assistance and not give up on their cases just because they have a lack of resources or lack of support or lack of something. And so I left the profession altogether to raise my son. And when I came back, I realized there was a really important need for people, even whether they decide to self-represent or not, they need the guidance and the assistance and the support to decide responsibly if they're going to do that. And if they're going to, at some point, hire an attorney, they need to choose the right attorney, and they need to learn to maximize that experience. So my motive for actually doing this is a culmination of things. And so I've been doing this for the past 6 years, and I must tell you, doing this is way more fulfilling than practicing law. I don't have, peers that I have to, play nice with. I don't have judges that I have to kiss the ring all the time. I'm literally just working with my clients and working to help them navigate their divorce or custody case as successfully as possible, given the climax. I'm in the climate of family court right now.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, that there's this idea that, and this is nothing against attorneys or the law system. I mean, the family court system is what it is. We can all point fingers and we can all notice the flaws. For the vast majority of people, family court works fairly decently. The problem is if you're dealing with somebody on the other side who is not playing fair, who is openly hostile towards you, who is making false allegations, who is doing all kinds of weirdness on their side,
that's when the family court really falls down for a lot of people. And I like what you said, that attorneys have their role within that family court system. And, they're not, a typical attorney is not going to be Matlock, or, a typical judge is not going to be Judge Judy or whoever you're thinking of. They're going to be a civil servant who is doing their job, or a private hired professional. And you're not their only client. And, so it's this mismatch between what people think is going to happen and what really does happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I must tell you, when I was in private practice, I realized all the things, all the concerns, all the disappointment. I realized in retrospect why family law happens to have the highest dissatisfaction rate in the industry. Because a lot of the things that, litigants, pro se or not, complain about now, I've done those things. Or
Yeah.
I intentionally made sure they didn't understand the family court process, or that they didn't understand the dynamics between myself and opposing counsel intentionally, so that I can continue to build them or continue to navigate their case the way I saw fit, that suited my needs, my motives, my goals, not theirs.
Right.
And so now I get to actually avoid all of that. I don't have to do any of that. I can literally focus on each client and what they need in their case, in their life, and in their future. And
Right.
it's so much more, again, it's so much more fulfilling.
Yeah.
It's challenging though, but it's much more fulfilling.
And you're right. There's definitely times where people can do this on their own. There's times, like I said, there's maybe a yellow caution flag on the track that you need to look at. And then there's times when I know that, because we've talked before, I know there's times when you tell people, hey, you're doing this, but there's huge risks here. And, there are reasons why attorneys go to school for so many years, because, you can't just open up a family code and read it in a night, or Google it or chat GPT it, or, AI it and get the answers. Because there's so many subtleties, and there's precedences, and there's things you need to understand. So let's go into your area of focus right now, Tracey. What would make a good case for somebody who's thinking, well, I'd like to save some money. I'd like to try to do this as a pro se person going through divorce, or doing divorce without an attorney? What would make kind of green flags for that to be a good option?
Okay, let's take the state of Florida. You're a mom. You're a primary caretaker you have been the primary caretaker of your two children, 2 and 4 years old. And dad, you guys are married. You're going through a divorce, and dad has been the primary breadwinner who's been out of the home 90% of the time. And you want 50-50 because Florida's a 50-50 state, but dad wants sole custody. You're fighting. You're fighting for 50-50. Dad's fighting for full custody because dad doesn't want to have to pay you child support. And he knows that he'll have to pay child support because he's the breadwinner. And so, and I'm not using gender roles, I'm just using them randomly. And so you don't want to pay an attorney because you're in a 50-50 state. And you know that Florida's a 50-50 state. You know that dad, who's been hands off, has a slim chance of getting sole custody. And so what you want is, the opportunity to self-represent, keep costs down, and still be able to advocate for yourself under the law. And yeah, that's a primary position to be in for pro se. Because when dad fights you for sole custody, he'll do things like, delay in tactics with providing documents and information. So dad is intentionally prolonging the process. So that's where a lot of people will say, well, I don't know if I can do pro se. Well, you still can do pro se. There's some tips and tricks that I work with people to help them move things along, even when the opposing party is doing things like that, to intentionally drag out the case or to exhaust you mentally, physically, and financially. So that's a primary position to be in, to self-represent. Because at the end of the day, if the case goes to trial, which it probably wouldn't, because, cases like that where judges know the likelihood of the outcome being the 50-50, the judges will strong arm the opposing party, who does have the right to go to trial and continue to still fight for sole custody. judges have a way of strong arming the party that they know is being unreasonable or unfair and getting them to resolve the case amongst themselves. So that's the primary scenario for 50-50. If you know the law is on your side, if you there's no hidden money in a divorce that you're fighting for, there's no businesses that needs to be assessed, you're literally fighting over custody in a situation where the chances of the opposing party getting their idea of custody is slim because of not just the law, but particularly because where you are, that's what judges tend to rule. That's the ideal situation for, pro se.
Yeah, and that's great. And so that's a community property state, right, Tracey? I think there's 9 or 10 of them in the United States. I'm in Texas. That's another one. But most states are going to be that equitable distribution, which means kind of like everything's looked at on a case-by-case basis. But that's not really true either, because isn't it kind of a default 50-50? And then you have to, it's not written anywhere, but don't the courts kind of go, okay, well, generally 50-50, but it's not cut and dried?
Depends. There's so many variables. Some counties, even within the state of New York, there's some counties where judges are like, listen, I know this is an ED state, but I'm not going through all this work for a state that's worth $50,000. We're not going to, all this headache for, what we're talking about, $50,000 in assets. We're not going to do that. I'm going to just split it down the middle and make things easy. Because at the end of the day, and this is one of the things I really focus on with people, is that at the end of the day, when the court is involved, the court is going to do what's logical to it. Not to the parties, not to the attorneys. The judge is going to do what's fair and what's convenient for them for the most part. So, and if splitting things 50-50 in an ED state makes sense to them, that's what they're going to do. So you can go downstate though, and the judge will see a $50,000, in assets and say, no, this is an ED state. So we're going to do it. We're going to go through the motions and we're going to decide what's fair based on the rules and the laws of the state of New York. So right. It really depends. It depends on your judge. It depends on your location. It depends on your circumstances. But the one underlying general principle is that judges will do what's really convenient for their docket. They don't want to be inundated with cases that are just not worth their time and effort.
Right. So thank you for that. So generally what I'm hearing you say is if there's limited assets, if it's very uncomplicated, in other words, there's not a whole bunch of other baby mama drama going on from past relationships, if there's no other kids that are already receiving child support from your spouse, if you're not already paying to another spouse, like this can all confuse things, right? A lot very quickly. If there's assets that you hold jointly, if there's a family business, all of this stuff adds to the complications of this.
And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're just red herrings that the parties know that can throw things off. There's a lot of tactics that litigants use, especially when they're pro se, that litigants use, and lawyers too, they're simply red herrings. So we know what those things you just mentioned can complicate things, but some of them that they are just things to throw out there just to delay the process, just to make negotiating a little bit more favorable. So these are the things that I really focus on with people. That's why every single case is, it's unique. There's no, overgeneralization of cases. The only overgeneralization is the judge's agenda.
Right. And this is why if you can mediate it, I think, speaking with somebody like you, knowing what you can ask for under the law, in mediation, there's the BATNA and the WATNA. What's your best alternative? What's your worst alternative? And that if you know what the courts are likely to do by working with somebody, Tracey in particular, who can kind of guide you and say, well, this is likely what you're going to hear from a judge. Then when you walk into mediation, if I get anything better than that, I'm ahead of the game. If I get anything less than that, maybe this isn't the right choice for me to make here.
In addition to that, because the one nuance that, in the services that I provide is, okay, this is what the judge is likely to do, and this is what the judge may not do. You need to understand that getting to those likely results, sometimes that is the work. That is the challenge. So what I focus on is, hey, listen, this is what the judge is likely to do, but these are, like I just mentioned, these are those red herrings that's going to throw the case off a little bit. If you hang in there long enough, though, you will get this outcome. Because the problem I have with mediation is that a lot of people think that they're mediating, they're resolving things, they're negotiating, they're going to settle. They're not thinking the possibility of litigation. Those mediated agreements, they do get violated every single day.
Right.
So when you're negotiating in mediation, you need to keep in mind what happens if this does get violated. If you
Right.
are forced to come back and actually seek enforcement, what is your judge likely to do then? What is that process going to look like for you?
Right. Yes. And that is absolutely a good point, because you're right. The mediator has no power to hold the parties to that agreement. You hold each other to that agreement. And then if one of you violates, then your next option sometimes is to return to mediation. I know a lot of mediators put that clause in and try to work it out. That saves you a little money. But if the person's already violated once, unless it was an oversight and they missed it. But if it's an oversight and they missed it, they probably try to make it up before you ever, there's a lot of things you got to think about. And that's where speaking to somebody really helps. Yeah, absolutely. So, Tracey, I love this. What about maybe some of the cautionary signs that you really need more support? Like, you need to speak to a family court strategist like yourself to understand the nuances of family court, and like you say, what you can and can't expect, what strategies you need to use to be able to show that. What are some of the yellow flags that you might see for if you're talking to a potential client?
One of the things I'm always asking people when I'm screening them and vetting them, because I do that, I don't work with just everybody, is I always get an idea. I want to get a sense of what their expectations are, right? Because a lot of people, believe it or not, their expectations are just insurmountable. There's just no way. And so when I start to, get that information and I vet them for that, a lot of times people will tell me their expectations is really, they're really firm on them. They expect 50-50, they expect soul, they expect this, they expect that, they expect to not spend any more money, they expect the judge to rule in their favor, they expect the judge to be, and the more they go into detail about what they expect, the more I'm wondering, I'm questioning, if what they're going through, the level of conflict that they're going through currently hasn't been as a result of their unreasonable expectations. And so one thing I'm always encouraging people is to not be so set on the specific outcome, but the life that you want to create, the life you want to see when this is all over. That's much more important. So it may not look like you having sole custody. It may look like you're having 50-50, but you still get to maximize the time that you have with your children, and you get to do travel without restriction and, enroll them in activities without restriction. It looks more like that. So it feels like you still have sole custody. And so the ones who are not open to see that, instantly I'm like, oh, well, I don't know. This may not be a great fit. The ones also who are right at the height of their PTSD, or who are right at the height of them recovering from any sort of abuse, I don't think that they should be working with me entirely, and I don't think they should be working with any type of attorney. I think that they really need to, if they're going to work with an attorney, they really need to vet the attorney to make sure the attorney understands those non-legal needs. A lot of the cases that attorneys take with any sort of abuse involved, where their client is at the height of it, dealing with the ramifications, the consequences, a lot of the problems come from the disconnect and the lack of trust and them being always in fight or flight mode. And so some of that can be sort of filtered out if the client or the litigant decided to work with an attorney who understands that. And whether the attorney is equipped to deal with that, at least they understand that, so that the way that they communicate, the way that they respond, the timing, all of that is centered around the fact that they're dealing with these issues. I think that's incredible. I don't work with people. I will say to them, hey, I think you need to get with, one, you need to be in therapy. Two, if you can find a coach, but you definitely need to be working with an attorney right now. Maybe later on, when you get to that point where you're starting to feel comfortable, your nervous system has started to, calibrate, then maybe come back and work with me. But right now, I think you're going to do more harm than good if you decide. The other thing is that when there's really complex issues involved that can easily run up into the six figures, I often suggest to people that before they run into the six figures, that they take some time to figure out non-legal ways to address some of the complex issues they're going to face. There are other alternatives that have nothing to do with court. There are other ways to get information. There are other ways to assess businesses. There's other ways to get some of the information you need that you're going to use in court. But and when that's the case, I don't necessarily think that the flip side of that is I don't think that necessarily working pro se or working with an attorney who's not going to, have their best interest in heart is going to be the best path for them to take. So there's, various scenarios that I've just put out there just to give you an idea of how I discern who should be working with me as pro se, who should be working with me if they have an attorney, and who should definitely just have an attorney. I can help them find the best attorneys, but that's where I end my services with them.
Yeah, and I think that's important for people listening to understand, because if you go into any kind of professional, I recently just completed a whole bunch of so I'm trained in high conflict divorce coaching. I'm also trained in relational trauma coaching. So we work through this coaching, not therapy, but coaching through the complex PTSD and the narcissistic recovery and all that stuff. And I think that, I'm starting to see a lot more attorneys that when they hear that now, they're saying, I know a divorce coach who specializes in this. And so I don't touch the legal stuff. I just really help the client work through this. And I so appreciate what you're saying, because I think that's number one rule. If you're talking to an attorney or a strategist or anybody who says, oh yeah, I work with everybody, ask them specifically, what training do you have dealing with people who are coming out of complex relationships and trauma? And if they can't give you a specific training they've done, then you have to evaluate whether you really want to work with that person.
Absolutely. That is so important.
So I can't believe how fast these conversations go. And you are such a wealth of information. So Tracey, let me ask you this one. Who are the people that you say, what are the big red X's? Don't ever try to do pro se. What group of people would you say, or is there a group of people that you would recommend? Yeah.
Number one, women who are women specifically who are coming out of highly abusive relationships. They should never be pro se. People who are English is not their first language, they should seldom be pro se. And the people who have those issues with there's hidden assets, and I'm talking about high stakes assets, businesses, I'm talking about high value businesses. Any situation where there's high net worth involved, I don't think that's ideal for anybody to be pro se. Those are the three things that I'm like, hey, wait a minute. No, I think you need to find an attorney. I'll help you find an attorney, but you need an attorney. If you want me to supplement, then sure, I'll do that. But those three scenarios, absolutely not. It should not be pro se, especially in high conflict divorce.
So Tracey, let's just take, and I know, we've got a few minutes here, so I don't want to rush you. Tell us briefly about the services that you offer, because you've mentioned several, and I just want people to get an understanding. We're going to give them the link to your website so they can go check out all the details, but just kind of an overview of what kind of services do you offer for clients?
So I do one-on-ones. I work with people one-on-one because I like to work with them based on who they are, what they have, and what their concerns are, and what they're dealing with. And when I mean what they're dealing, it's not just the opposing party. That's actually a fraction of their concerns. It's the opposing counsel, it's the attorneys they're working with or have worked with, it's the judge, and it's all the other key players. So I work with them one-on-one, either by the hour or by packages, either monthly, 3 months, or 12 months. But we work together closely on strategy. So all those issues, all those gaps, we're filling those. We're working, down to, hey, let me tell you how to speak when you go to the courtroom. Let me show you the demeanor you should have. So I'm working with them closely, one-on-one, regularly. I have a team where we do research, we do some role playing, they have access to my platform where I have videos and worksheets and all that stuff. So I work with them specifically to position their case so that when they're in court, whether they're pro se or not, that they are actually understanding exactly what the issues are, the key issues for their judge. They're understanding exactly what their options are and which ones they should choose based on their overall goals. And number three, they're actually working to resolve the case in a way that's going to be satisfactory to their overall principles, as general principles, as they set for themselves. And so, yes, that's what I do. So hourly or by the month, 3 months or 12 months, but we're working closely one-on-one.
And I think this is so valuable. And I think I want to stress that as a divorce coach, I kind of help people get their ducks in a row to interview attorneys. But what Tracey does is a huge in-depth approach to this. And let's face it, I've never been a family attorney. I've been a mediator for 30 years. I know a lot of family attorneys. I've sat for hours and listened to them discuss these kind of things. But that's not the same as having an actual attorney who has practiced in the family court system guide you through this step by step. So, Tracey, I so appreciate what you do and the services you provide for people. We're almost out of time, but I want to ask you, what is your one piece of advice you would like to give for anybody listening to this podcast?
The one thing I always emphasize to people is no matter which stage or phase you're especially in high conflict, just because you could do something doesn't mean you should. And that's the overall mission of what I provide, is for you to understand that every decision you make needs to be informed. You need to be making those decisions based on having the accurate and appropriate information for you, not for somebody else who's been in a situation like yours, but for you, for your current situation and your future. And so that's important to know. Just because you could doesn't mean you should. Let's focus on finding out what the best route is for you in your journey, whether that be pro se or something in between or a lawyer represented.
Yeah. Great piece of advice. Tracey, if people want to find out more about what you do or even reach out to work with you, what's the best way to do that?
They can feel free to visit my website. It's at www.thedivorcesolutionist.com. They can listen to my podcast, Self-Represented in Family Court, or they can simply email me at tracy@thedivorcesolutionist.com, which I'm definitely open to. Every Wednesday, I do open Wednesday up from 10 to 4 Eastern Standard Time to you calling me. You will get me on the phone and talk to me for 15 minutes on a Wednesday at 862-800-7850. And if you're in North New Jersey, you can visit me because I'm doing those in person at a coffee shop around North New Jersey, one every single Wednesday until the end of August. So, yes.
That is so cool. I love that. And I'm going to make sure all of that gets listed, including your podcast, your phone number to reach out to talk to you. Tracey, thank you so much for all that you've shared here today. This has been really enlightening. I've learned a lot. I know everybody else listening has learned a lot too. And I really appreciate, like I say, you coming on here and sharing this with us.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure as usual.
And thank you everyone for listening in to this episode of The D Shift. And don't forget to tune in to the next one.
Thanks for listening and supporting the D Shift podcast. If you would like to attend live trainings by our amazing guests and have a chance to ask questions and get answers from our experts, join the D Shift crew. For more details and to sign up, head on over to www.divorcecoachforwomen and click on the podcast page.